Good afternoon, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Hasanov and let's see the top stories. Donald Trump announces major deals with Qatar during the second leg of his Middle East tour. Russian President Vladimir Putin is not on Kremlin list of officials attending Ukraine peace talks in Türkiye. France announces the expulsion of several Algerian diplomats in retaliation for Algiers' decision to send back 15 French officials earlier this week. U.S. President Donald Trump continued his Middle East tour with a landmark visit to Qatar, where the two countries signed a $200 billion aviation deal and expanded military cooperation. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Ubi Shibander, has more.
It is a presidential visit that is leaving a lasting mark. President Trump's Middle East tour continued on Wednesday, where after a meeting with the leaders of the Gulf Cooperation Council and a widely applauded joint meeting with Syria's new leader, President Trump traveled to Qatar. Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani hailed American President Trump's visit to Doha on Wednesday as, quote, historic, affirming that it marks a turning point in the strategic relationship between the two countries. Both the U.S. and Qatar signed a number of key agreements in various fields, including defense and aviation. In the aviation field, Qatar finalized a major agreement of over $200 billion to purchase jets from U.S. manufacturer Boeing. In the defense sector, the two sides signed a statement of intent on enhanced defense cooperation, as well as letters of offers and acceptance for the acquisition of the American MQ-9B drone. A joint declaration of strategic cooperation was also signed between the two countries. Earlier, the Qatari Emir said that his country is working with U.S. President Trump to promote peace. The Qatari Emir said that he is working with the U.S. to promote peace in the region as well as in other regions, such as Russia and Ukraine. President Trump's visit to Qatar is the first by an American president to the Arabian Gulf country since George W. Bush's trip to Doha in 2003. Qatar hosts the American Al Udeid base, one of America's largest military bases in the Middle East. And the White House on Wednesday announced that it had secured economic commitments worth at least $1.2 trillion from Qatar. Combined with the hundreds of billions of dollars in economic and defense deals that President Trump signed in Riyadh earlier in the week, and the announcement of the lifting of all sanctions on Syria, President Trump's Middle East trip is, without a doubt, having a significant impact on the region, while securing massive deals intended to boost the American economy. Ubi Shibander, Washington, D.C., A News.
As President Donald Trump concludes a high-profile three-day tour of the Gulf, fresh diplomatic ripples are being felt across the region. With Saudi Arabia striking key agreements with Washington, questions are emerging about Israel's diminishing leverage, particularly as it resumes humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza under international pressure. We explore whether Trump's Gulf diplomacy is recalibrating the path toward Israeli-Saudi normalization or complicating it further. Joining us from Jerusalem is Maurice Hirsch, Director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority, Accountability and Reform at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Mr. Hirsch, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Hirsch, let's start with Trump's Gulf tour. What do you make of the agreements he secured with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, and how significant are they in shaping U.S. priorities in the region?
I think it's been always very clear that President Trump's major goal for his visit to the Gulf, to the Middle East, was to really improve the American economy. That's one of the subjects which was really a leader in the run-up to the elections, and President Trump has put that first and foremost on his agenda moving forward. And I think more than a political diplomatic trip, this has been really an economic financial trip, securing massive purchases by the Middle East countries of U.S. products and strengthening the U.S. economy and companies.
Mr. Hirsch, from Israel's standpoint, what practical leverage does it still have in Washington now that Gulf countries are offering strategic and economic incentives on a different scale?
So I think that President Trump's really dedication to the idea of Middle East peace hasn't changed from his last term, I think that it's important to him now to ensure that the peace of the Abraham Accords is extended throughout the region. It isn't a question of Israeli leverage over Washington, but rather an understanding of common interests. It is a common interest for Israel and for the United States to expand the peace in the Middle East, rather than continuing this cycle of violence driven by the Ayatollahs in Iran and its axis of evil. That is something which has to be disbanded, dismantled, for the benefit of all of the residents of the region.
Mr. Hirsch, there has been talk of Israeli-Saudi normalization for years. Given these recent developments, is that goal closer or slipping further away?
So really, I think the question is very much dependent on the Saudi leadership. Are they interested in joining really the axis of peace and of the Western countries pushing for normalization, or are they steadfast in their dedication to being really hijacked by the Palestinian rejectionism and rejection of Israel's idea and right to exist, and as well as joining possibly even in the Iranian axis of terror? That's really a decision for the Saudi leadership more than a decision for the Israeli leadership or even for President Trump.
So Israel's decision to resume humanitarian aid to Gaza came almost in parallel with Trump's Gulf tour. Do you see this as a tactical concession to Washington or something more structural?
No, I think this is something that Israel has been following the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip now for months, all through the war, but more intensively in the last period since Hamas decided to abandon really fulfilling its obligation to release all of the remaining hostages. And I think that now Israel is seeing that this process of maximum pressure on Hamas is actually bearing fruit. Hamas is showing more flexibility than ever before to come to an agreement to release the terrorists, to release the Israeli hostages, and whether it be as a result of the military pressure being put on Hamas, whether it's being a result of the embargo and the siege on Hamas and its lines of support, and whether it be from really the political ramifications of Trump and the discussions in the Middle East.
Maurice Hirsch, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time. The U.S. Treasury Department announced sanctions targeting 6 individuals and 12 entities involved in helping Iran manufacture key components for its ballistic missile program on Wednesday. The sanctions focus on groups based in Iran and China that support the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in producing carbon fiber materials used for intercontinental ballistic missiles. These measures are part of President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign, which continues despite ongoing U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Iran described recent negotiations as positive, but said new U.S. sanctions undermine the process. In related moves, the Treasury recently sanctioned more than 20 companies linked to Iranian oil shipments to China, as well as a Chinese refinery and port operators involved in Iranian oil trade. President of Iran Masoud Pezeshkian says that Iran will not bow to any bully, and he made the comment after U.S. President Donald Trump's criticism of Tehran during his Gulf tour on Wednesday. Trump said he was open to a deal with Iran, but added that Tehran must stop supporting terrorism and its proxy wars and permanently hold its nuclear ambitions. In response on state TV, Pezeshkian said Iran would not be intimidated. Fresh nuclear talks between Iran and the United States ended in Oman on Sunday, with officials saying that there will be more negotiations soon. Ukraine says it was still weighing its approach to the upcoming peace summit in Türkiye, as uncertainty surrounds Russia's participation. The absence of key leaders, including Putin, is raising questions about the positive outcome of the negotiations.
Before leaving for Ankara, the Ukrainian president said that Kyiv was awaiting confirmation of Russia's delegation to the upcoming peace talks in Türkiye before deciding on the next steps. In his nightly video address, Volodymyr Zelensky called the current signals in the media unconvincing.
The answers to all the questions about this war, why it began, why it continues, all those answers are in Moscow. How this war ends depends on the world. Ukraine is ready for any format of negotiations, and we are not afraid of meetings.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is not among the names listed by the Kremlin as being due to attend, despite calls from Zelensky for him to participate. According to the Kremlin, Russia's delegation will instead be headed by presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky. Reports also indicate US President Donald Trump will not take part, though he previously suggested he might if Putin attended. Zelensky accuses Putin of continuing military strikes on Ukraine instead of seriously engaging with the peace process. He says the key obstacle to progress is Russia's unwillingness to commit to peace. The Ukrainian leader has previously stated he is ready to meet Putin face to face if the Russian president agrees, pledging to do everything possible to make that meeting happen.
As Ukraine and Russia start direct negotiations, people on both sides are reacting with a mix of hope, frustration and doubt. While some welcome the prospect of dialogue, others fear it will change little.
While Ukraine and Russia are set to begin direct talks to negotiate a ceasefire, reactions on the streets of both countries reveal a shared mood: skepticism, cautious hope, and fatigue. In Ukraine, where the full-scale war has entered its fourth year, many doubt that any negotiation with Moscow will bring real change.
It seems to me Zelensky is doing what most Ukrainians would like him to do, but whether it will work, I think not. The only thing Putin understands is force. He doesn't understand talks. It will be yet another meeting, and then things will go on as they are now.
Unfortunately, Ukrainians have been in this war for a very long time. The full-scale war has gone on longer than anyone expected. That's why, sadly, Ukrainians are already ready to make concessions, even territorial ones, just to stop further land grabs and killings, to bring this war to an end so things don't get even worse.
In Moscow, some still cling to hope, but few expect a breakthrough.
The hope is slender, but there is still hope. I fear that once again the dialogue with Ukraine will fail, unless there is some help from other countries, I mean US and Europe. Maybe something works this way.
They're trying to push for this 30-day ceasefire. Putin will not cooperate. We need a long perspective peace, that's all.
Many remain skeptical as Russia's President Vladimir Putin is not participating at the talks in Istanbul. However, a delegation will be there, led by Russian presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky, together with 3 other high-level delegates and 4 experts.
France and Algeria are locked in another round of diplomatic tensions as both sides expel officials in a rapid back and forth. The row comes just weeks after a short-lived effort to ease tensions.
Tensions between France and Algeria have flared again as Paris announces the expulsion of several Algerian diplomats in retaliation for Algiers' decision to send back 15 French officials earlier this week. France's foreign ministry summoned Algeria's chargé d'affaires on Wednesday to deliver the message, stating that officials holding diplomatic passports without valid visas would be forced to leave French territory. The ministry did not specify how many individuals would be expelled. The move follows a series of tit-for-tat expulsions between the two countries, which began in mid-April when Algeria expelled 12 French officials. France responded by sending home 12 Algerian diplomats and consular staff and recalled its ambassador. Just last month, there had been signs of reconciliation after France's Foreign Affairs Minister Jean-Noël Barrot visited Algiers, but relations have quickly deteriorated again. Speaking to French media, Barrot called Algeria's actions incomprehensible and brutal. He added that the dispute is less about numbers and more about principles, saying, Algeria wanted to send back our agents, we're sending back theirs. The Algerian Foreign Ministry has yet to release an official statement. However, Algeria's state-run press agency claims the recent French officials being expelled had been appointed under irregular conditions. France, in turn, accuses Algeria of breaching a 2013 bilateral agreement by imposing new entry conditions for French public officials. The diplomatic rift also comes against a broader backdrop of strained ties, notably after President Emmanuel Macron's support for Morocco in the Western Sahara dispute angered Algiers last year.
China will pause export controls on 28 U.S. companies for 90 days. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce announced it had stopped these companies from exporting certain products in April. But after recent talks with the United States in Switzerland, both countries agreed to suspend these restrictions from the 14th of May for 3 months. The talks also led to a reduction in extra tariffs, lowering them to 10%. Earlier this year, the U.S. raised tax hikes on Chinese goods several times, reaching as high as 145%. Beijing responded by increasing levies on American products, up to 125%. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said that countries like Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Azerbaijan and Armenia could soon join the Abraham Accords. He cited positive reactions and progress towards resolving conflicts in these nations. Witkoff expressed confidence that more countries could join the Abraham Accords in the coming month. He said this would reflect Trump's commitment to advancing peace and stability in the region. Previously, our Andy Mioch discussed Washington's senior envoy Steve Witkoff's recent statement that Azerbaijan might be invited to join the Abraham Accords with former Mossad agent Ken van Lerland. Ken shared his opinion on why Azerbaijan's invitation is so important for the region and what role Azerbaijan could play in the negotiations.
So the Abraham Accords is essential for creating peace between countries that have been at war with each other for a very long time. And it's not only for, let's say, for peace perception, but also for economical reasons that it is important and imperative to create a new region in peace and take out all the extremities that we have seen over so many years. So I think it's a wonderful initiative by the Trump administration to pursue what they have started so many years ago, to extend the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia, possibly Syria, Libya, Lebanon, and involving Azerbaijan is a very, very hard idea, because Azerbaijan is in a unique position to bring prosperity but also peace to the region and deal between enemies that have been facing each other for a very, very long time. So this is a great initiative. The fact actually is that the Trump administration are putting a lot of pressure on this. It's of eminent importance to make it happen actually in a very short timeline and not too long, because it's very difficult with the current situation in Gaza and Lebanon and in Syria to take a very long period of time to make this happen. I think that the timing is essential to make it happen right now.
Turkey's economic transformation is under the spotlight again, this time in London. The Treasury and Finance Minister Mehmet Şimşek addressed investors at a high-profile European Bank for Reconstruction and Development meeting, assuming the international community that Ankara's economic program is on track, despite recent global turbulence. Şimşek also touched on inflation growth and a major shift in Turkey's long-running domestic security struggle. Turkey's economic program is continuing with determination and delivering results. That's according to the Treasury and Finance Minister Mehmet Şimşek. Speaking at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development's annual meeting in London, Şimşek gave a detailed presentation titled Turkey's Economic Transformation and Growing Investment Potential.
It is on track, it is working, it is delivering. Look, the essence of our medium-term program, or we call it sometimes macroeconomic stabilization and reform program, the essence of it is attaining price stability. We're making good progress. Inflation is down from peak of 75% recently to about 38%. We see inflation trending down. Now, recent turbulence has raised some question marks about expectations, but financial conditions are tighter, highly likely disinflationary. Oil price have fallen significantly. That's also significantly disinflationary, let's put it this way. So we see inflation staying on track. Growth could turn out to be slower, but we can live with that. Labor market is pretty tight. Unemployment rate is at 20-year low.
Turkey has a population of 86 million and a GDP exceeding $1.3 trillion and remains an attractive market for global investors. According to Şimşek, the national income per capita surpassed $15,000 last year. Between 2003 and 2024, the Turkish economy grew by more than 5% on average annually. In a significant development, Şimşek also commented on the recent dissolution announcement by the PKK terrorist group, a conflict that has cost Turkey an estimated $1.8 trillion over the 5 decades.
This is huge credit positive. We will no longer be wasting our energy and resources on combating terror. We will spend our energy and money on rebuilding. Southeast part of Turkey, eastern Turkey, where demographics is extremely favorable. It will become the new engine of Turkey's growth. But also, it will help stabilize the region. It will help us to lift the entire region, including Syria, Iraq, etc. Everybody will benefit from peace, stability, because that's the only path to prosperity.
Addressing a question on protectionist trade policies, Şimşek criticized the growing fragmentation of global trade, calling it a lose-to-lose situation. He underlined that while global trade is a key driver of economic growth, Turkey's economic momentum also relies on strong domestic demand and investment. Exports of goods account for around 20% of Turkey's GDP, while the services sector makes up another 10%. Afghanistan is moving to boost regional trade. In Kabul, the country's transport minister met with Azerbaijan's ambassador to deepen cooperation on the Lapis Lazuli corridor, a route connecting Afghanistan to Europe. Our Tamim Bahis has more.
Afghanistan is taking another step toward regional economic integration. In Kabul, Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation Hamidullah Akhundzada met with Azerbaijani Ambassador Ilham Mammadov to discuss strengthening transit and trade cooperation. The meeting focused on expanding bilateral ties in trade and logistics, with both sides emphasizing the importance of the Lapis Lazuli corridor, a strategic trade route linking Afghanistan to Europe via Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia and Türkiye. The corridor is named after the ancient Afghan gemstone Lapis Lazuli, once transported along this very path to European markets. Officials discussed ways to improve transit efficiency and reduce bureaucratic hurdles along the route. Minister Akhundzada highlighted that Azerbaijan, with its ports on the Caspian Sea, plays a vital role in connecting Afghan goods to Europe, while also gaining access to South Asian markets through Afghanistan. Ambassador Mammadov welcomed the cooperation and reaffirmed Azerbaijan's support for joint infrastructure projects that improve connectivity across the region. The two sides agreed to form working groups to follow up on technical and custom coordination. As efforts continue, the Lapis Lazuli corridor could become a cornerstone for regional trade, linking Central Asia with Europe and beyond. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Georgia's parliament adopted a draft law on diplomatic service in an expedited manner. Critics see the changes being introduced as a tool of political control, while the government calls them a step toward greater professionalism. Our Nini Nikolashvili has the details in Tbilisi.
Changes initiated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs introduce stricter ethical standards and evaluation mechanisms for diplomats. Under the new rules, the diplomatic staff will be required to perform their duties honestly, guided by the public interest and the general rules of ethics. The law also expands grounds for earlier dismissal if the diplomat's conduct is seen as damaging to the country's picture or contradicts Georgia's official foreign policy line. Another key change is the extension of overseas assignments from 6 months to 1 year and more frequent performance evaluation at least twice a year. The government says that these reforms will strengthen discipline and align the diplomatic corps with core state values. But the opposition parties and civil society groups warn that these reforms could be used for political control and could open the door for politically motivated purges. They claim that the vague definition of public interest and ethics could be used to sideline diplomats seen as disloyal or independent. The analysts say that these changes raises fresh questions about Georgia's diplomatic independence and its commitment to the democratic standards. With the international partners closely watching Tbilisi's political trajectory, any perception of politicizing the foreign services could further strain Georgia's global reputation, particularly with the EU and its Western allies. It's Nini Nikolashvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.